It was a windy late spring morning just before solstice, filming on top of Nose Hill in the heart of Calgary, Treaty 7, Blackfoot Territory. We were grateful to speak with Brendon Many Bears from Siksika Nation about the cultural importance of lookout points and tipi rings, vision quests and balance, reconciliation archaeology, the importance of ceremony within science, goodie bags of tools, and exploring the Blackfoot scientific stories of these lands. Without further ado, the Ancestral Science Podcast welcomes Brendon Many Bears.
Do you want to introduce yourself in your own way?
Yeah, okay, Nidanako, Brendon Many Bears, Nitomotato, Siksika. Right now we're standing on Nose Hill. In the Blackfoot language, we would call this Itsupua Tamua, which translates to Lookout Hill. The reason why we called it Lookout Hill is because if you stand at the top of the hill, you have a good vantage point over the prairies. This was really important when we were hunting buffalo or tracking the buffalo, and it was really important to see if any other nations were coming across. So what we would do is we would send down a scout, and then they would go see what their intentions were, if they were just passing by, if they wanted to negotiate with our chief, or if they wanted to come here for a battle. We would also have someone here stand on the hill watching the scout and observing what was going on. So if any incident happened, we would send a party down to go meet the other nation that was passing by.
So cool. And you said you knew from what people were wearing, where they're from. Hey?
Yeah, exactly. So for instance, the Blackfoot people, we generally had white tanned hides. So it was very bright. Some nations, they tanned their hide, they smoked their hides, what gave it a more tan, a more brownish hide look. So when we spot that, we can tell what nation they were from, and then we would go see what they were up to. And other instances too, we would look at their regalia to see if it was colored. If they had a specific paint color on their regalia, we would know what nation they were from, and then we would go down and speak to them and see what they were up to here.
You guys have really good eyesight.
Yeah.
To have that job.
Yeah.
I would not be hired for that job. So there's something very cool behind us.
Yeah.
You want to talk about this?
Yeah, this is medicine wheel. This is the Blackfoot medicine wheel. This is actually not a historical site. This isn't an archaeological site just yet. Maybe in 200 years, it will be an archaeological site. But
is that
for now,
the cutoff for?
yeah, around that time, I think. But right now, this was made very recently. This was made back in 2015. With one of the elders from I'm not too sure if he was from the Siksika Nation or the Piikani or Kainai, but he was part of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Mm-hmm. Anyways, what this medicine wheel represents is all of Blackfoot Confederacy. You can see all of the symbols in there. They represent each of the nation that's a part of Blackfoot Confederacy. That includes Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, and I might butcher the last one, Piikani. I don't know if I said that right. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. But they're the nation down below the border in the Blackfoot Territory, in Montana. So they're also Blackfoot as well. So that makes up 4 of the nations that are part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and so that's what this medicine wheel represents. I've heard there is another medicine wheel located on Nose Hill, but that one's kept from the public due to the fact that we don't want it to be disturbed by anyone. We don't want the rocks to be removed or disturbed in any way. We want to have that respect and preserve it as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And these have directional significance as well.
Yeah, so they help us. So this helps us with a few things. So it helps us with the directions and also with the stars, I believe. I think from the elders I spoke to, this helps us track the time of the year. So right now, the pointer marker pointing this way is north. That one is south. This is east, and then this is west, heading towards the mountain. These also help us indicate the time of the year as well. I believe once the sun and the moon aligns up with the markers, that tells us when the summer and winter solstice is happening. So that's really important to locate that time of the year, so we can have those celebrations and those ceremonies that go along with them as well.
It's like the OG Stonehenge in Turtle Island.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's really cool. So it's much more complex than we originally thought it was.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're overlooking all these different directions and on Nose Hill here. And what would people use this area for?
Yeah, so this hill, Nose Hill in particular, had a huge cultural significance to the Blackfoot people. So we came here for ceremonies. So those ceremonies included fasting, having vision quests, and also having some face painting ceremonies as well. For the fasting, we would work with the elder, and the person who is working with the elder would pick a spot for them to fast for 4 entire days. So that would mean they wouldn't drink water, they wouldn't have anything to drink, they wouldn't eat, or they wouldn't sleep for the entire 4 days. And so the reason for that is to so that they can have a vision, and they would sit there for the 4 days. And this is really beneficial for the body as well. This is why we only did it once a year, is because once we did that, it helped restart our body. It regulated everything in our system, and it just kind of kept everything back on track, and then restarted. Not necessarily restarted our body, but it restarted our dietary.
Dietary systems?
Yeah, dietary systems. Yeah, which was really neat. I didn't know. Growing up, I've always heard about fasting and the ceremonial sides of it, but I never knew about the scientific parts where how it restarts your body or helps regulate your body. I should say.
It's like a balance, right?
Yeah,
if you think
yeah.
of like mental, physical, spiritual, emotional.
Yeah.
I think often we're out of balance on a lot of days, maybe, and that there's a rebalancing to that.
Yeah, it helps
especially
balance.
That physical part, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it helps balance your body and helps reconnect with the land, helps reconnect with your surroundings. It also helps clear your mind and gives you a better insight of what's happening. So we only did that once a year. Our ancestors knew that we only need to do that once a year because it impacted our health for the entire year until we needed to do it again the following year. So we would only come on this hill during the warmer months. So we would come here for ceremonies, and those ceremonies would be worked with the elders and our knowledge keepers, and we would be here. And we wouldn't necessarily be camping here for a long period of time. It would be a shortened period of time that we would camp here, just because in the warmer months we would use this place for ceremonial usage, and then after we were done, we would go west into the mountains and continue our ceremonies out in the mountains there. So once we got into the mountains, we were going into Stony territory. So when we got into their territory, we had to cooperate and work with them, so that way everything was kept peaceful, and that way we can continue our ceremonies as well. So I guess a little fun fact is the Cave and Basin area that's in Banff. That's a neutral area between the Blackfoots and the Stonies. We kept that a neutral area. We didn't want any fighting or any sort of conflict happening in that area, because that was ceremonial grounds for both the Blackfoots and the Stonies. We came together, and that was a peaceful area for us to have our ceremonies and to talk amongst each other and share our ceremonies as well in some cases, I believe.
Was there a time of year that a vision quest would often happen?
Usually a vision quest would happen in the summer months, I believe. Yeah. We would the elder that you're working with would sit you out in a spot, and they'll have you overlooking the mountains or the prairies, and you would sit there for 4 entire days and not drink, eat, or sleep. And you'd sit there and you would wait for a vision. So you would have to endure all of the weather. So you'll have to endure the sunlight, the rain. Sometimes it snows. You would have to endure all of that through those entire 4 days. And I've heard the worst of them all, like although like the rain could get really cold, the worst of it all was sitting in the sun and having the sun radiate on you all day.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge. That was the most challenging part.
So you go in with an intention.
Yeah, you're going there with intention. So everything that we do within our ceremonies is with intention, and it's to give back, but also to learn something while we're in the ceremony as well.
You mentioned the Cave and Basin.
Yeah.
And that's a site in Banff. That's Banff is a very touristy city, a town around here. And there's a misperception, I guess, on the story of the discoveries of the Cave and Basin, and I guess those hot springs that are there.
Yeah.
So I guess the story is the CP rail people found this smoke, or not steam, coming out of the ground, and put a pole down, and like, wow, this is amazing! Look at these hot springs. And then Banff was created. But people have known about that for a very long time, and you mentioned that as a place where people came together, and the Stony people and Blackfoot people came together. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the Cave and Basin area, we known about that area prior to contact with the settlers.
It was not
and
discovered.
Europeans. Yeah, it wasn't discovered. It was already there. We were already practicing our ceremonies in there long before they built it into a tourist attraction. But it was funny. When I was on a tour there, I was joking around with the tour guide. He was telling us about the person that was from the CP Railway. Is that correct?
Yeah.
He was telling me how the person never took a bath in quite some time, and so this was his first time taking a dip in water, and this was during the winter time. So he climbed down there on a tree, and he took his first bath in months. And so I made a joke. I was like, "Oh, is that why it smells so bad now?"
That's a good one. It still smells like that first.
Yeah.
Discover the hot springs.
Yeah. So, but the reason why it smells like that is the sulfur in the water. But yeah, I thought that would be a fun joke to poke at the settlers.
Good joke. Good joke. You
Thank
did
you.
well. The snail survived.
Yeah, the snails survived.
Really cute.
Yeah, there's a lot of snails in that area too. So those snails are pretty rare, and they can only be found in that basin.
I think anywhere. It's the only where in the world that
the
those
only
specific.
that's the only spot in the world that can be found. They're really specific snails, so they really like the climate there and like everything the environment offers them. So I think it's really cool that they chose that spot.
Yeah, and that spot also I've heard from different elders is significance with because it's the middle of the four directions. All the four corridors come together, so there's a lot of energy in that area too.
Yeah. So there's a lot of energy within that area. So I'm not too sure what the perimeters were for the area, but I'm pretty sure it kind of goes outwards out of Banff. That was considered the neutral area. Yeah. So when we went there together with the Stonies, we collectively went there to have our own ceremonies. And of course, we have to remember that the Blackfoot and Stonies have their own ceremonies as well, and they could mean different things. But we both respected that, and we both honored that, and we went there with good intention to have our ceremonies and respected one another, which was really great.
Cool. So Brendon, why are you here today?
Yeah, so behind us is site EGPM 143.
That's what I was gonna say. It must be EGPM 143.
Yeah, that's what we call it around here.
It's a tradition name.
Yeah, that's what our ancestors came here. They're like, we're going to EGPM 143. So that's just the archaeologist site number for it. So as you go across Canada and we find more excavation sites, that's what we would title them as. And so 143 is the 143rd site that has been uncovered in this area, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if it's specifically Nose Hill, but I think in Calgary or in the province of Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we is
the archaeology team. So that includes we're here working with the students of UFC. So we're here and so it's a collaboration between the University of Calgary and then the elders of Siksika as well. So the knowledge keepers come here and they're making sure they're connecting the dots of what we're finding.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this in particular, how did this come about, and who just found this or recovered this, or how did this day come about?
Yeah, so so knowing that this used to be a historical ceremonial site for the Blackfoot people, there are 13 known other stone rings found on this hill. This one in particular, the rocks were already shown above ground, and the city of Calgary notified, or they already knew that the rocks were above ground. So what they did was they created this bike path, and they intentionally looped around it so people can walk on the bike path, and then also if they see the rocks, they can observe it and appreciate them. Unfortunately, because human nature.
That's not human nature.
Yeah, unfortunately, because people want to walk in a straight line, they walked in a straight line and cut through the path, and so they created their own path. And over time, I think it was in the last 15 to 20 years, they've been walking on the path so much that they're eroding the ground above it. And so before the rocks become loose or before anyone is able to kick the rocks, we don't want them to be disturbed.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here right now, excavating the rocks and documenting everything, and we're working with the elders from Siksika and making sure that we're following our protocols as well, and we're preserving the rocks as well. So after we're done excavating the site, the rocks are going to be placed back exactly where they were found. and I'm not too sure how that process is going to work. If they're going to put cement underneath the rocks, or if they're just going to backfill and leave the rocks there exposed. But the plan is to keep them there permanently and make sure that they don't get disturbed in the future.
Awesome. So you said you're working alongside elders and Siksika community, and which is amazing because that really is how to bring together global and indigenous science and collaborating on this project.
Yeah.
What are some protocols that you followed, and what have the elders guided you?
So first and foremost, before we start a dig like this, especially when it's on like Blackfoot Territory or even any indigenous territory, it's really important to work with the elders of that nation and to make sure you do an opening ceremony for that. So for us,
that doesn't happen for real.
Yeah, no,
it's happening more now.
Yeah, no, which is great.
Yeah.
And like Lindsay, my instructor there from the University of Calgary, she's really amazing. She's such a huge ally to the surrounding nations around Calgary.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to be working with her and her team. So before we begin this, we work with Kent, a young man who's also a bundle holder in Siksika. So what we did was we had to undergo a face paint ceremony, and so what the face paint ceremony protects us from is anything that we find on the dig. As we're digging it up, we uncover it and make sure that everything is done respectfully. So that helps us that protects us from any bad and negative energy that may be here, which is unlikely. But it also helps us connect with the artifacts as well and make sure that it gives us that permission to dig them as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good to see that, especially with archaeology, which I think has gotten a bad name, with taking things from sacred sites and not respecting them. So it's really good to see that this is being done here and that you're a part of this to help that process.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to be a part of this. Honestly, if I'm going to be honest here, working with Lindsay and her team, this is like the truest form of reconciliation I've ever seen, because Lindsay's been taken into our community and she's been into ceremony, so she has a really good idea of the culture.
So who have you been working with to follow protocols and to connect these ways of knowing?
So we've been working with our elders from the Siksika Nation. They've been providing us that information that's very vital, especially when we're working on a site like this, because this is Nose Hill was once a historical ceremonial site for the Blackfoot people, and so working with elders, they help connect the dots and bridge those gaps in between what we're finding and what's part of our culture. And so when they're telling us and teaching us the culture, it's making those connections with our artifacts, and so we have a better understanding of what we're finding, and we know what they were used for. So that's why the elders are here, and they're very vital for that, because they provide that very important information and connects a lot of things that helps us with our dig as we excavate.
Who are the elders that you're working with?
So the elders that we're working with is Kent, a young man, and Herman Yellow Old One, who are from the Siksika Nation. So they come here and provide their very important information, and they're very crucial for this, and they're really great elders too. So they hold a lot of knowledge, and they share them with the students here, and it's been really fun to be able to teach the students here about our culture and share that with them, so that way they have more respect for the culture as well. And they've been showing really great respect. We've been taking them to different locations throughout Alberta, different historical sites such as Old Woman's Jump, Old Woman's Buffalo Jump down south.
Yeah.
The Sundial Medicine Wheel also down south, and so we're making sure that they get the full experience. They have that culture cemented into their minds. So when they're sick, when they're excavating, they know what to do and how to respect them, because that's really important to our culture, and that's really important that they follow those protocols as well, because they're working with our artifacts.
Of course. Okay, let's go check it out.
All right.
Okay, so this is why you're here. Can you tell us what this is and the significance of it?
Yeah, so what this is right here, this is a stone ring. In the Blackfoot culture, we don't call them tipis. That's a Lakota and Dakota word, so we would call them nitois. So this would be a nitois ring. This is why we're here, and this is why we're excavating. If you look at these ones over here, so these nitois rings, these are really important for us. They are also like a good indicator of someone camping here, and also have setting up their nitois.
And how do you know this is? You said this was pre-contact.
Yeah, so this is pre-contact. So a good way to notify if it was pre-contact is well, one of the good indications is the stones themselves. The stones indicate that these are pre-contact. Prior to the arrival of the Europeans and the settlers, we would make our teepees and we would use stones to hold down our teepee canvases. And these stones would be left behind as we migrated around. And when we came back the next season, we would reuse these stones because they would be markers for our areas when we returned. So we, for instance, let's say someone set this up around this time of the year, and then as they migrated throughout the year and then they came back here, they would find it again and use that for their same place to camp.
Okay.
So it was a really good place to mark off where their campsites were. It was really important as well. But after contact, when we made contact with Europeans and settlers, we transitioned from using stones to wooden pegs. So we made that switch because we can bring the pegs with us. They're much more lighter. We left the rocks behind because they're so heavy. We couldn't carry them all with us.
Like, just put it over your back. And
Yeah, no, we couldn't carry them with us, so we had to leave them behind. But with the wooden pegs, we can bring them with us, and that way we always had them with us, and we didn't have to go look for resources. We always had them instantly, so that way when we needed to set up our nitois, we can set them up right away.
Okay.
Yeah. The dog days also predates contact with the Europeans. So this was an era where, so the dog days predates contact with the Europeans. This era also predates contact with the horses as well. Before we had horses, we had the dogs, and they were very important to our culture because they were the ones that carried around our nitois on the travois. So we would put the supplies and materials on the travois, and the I'm gonna call it in Blackfoot imida, which is the dog. The imida would carry the travois across the prairies as we migrated into different locations. So the imida were very vital and very important to our culture because they helped our way of life. They helped us transport our home across the prairies. But as we made contact with the settlers and the Europeans, they also brought the horses with them. Once we got into contact with the horses, we transitioned from using the dogs and began using the horses. Yeah. So what that looked like, that affected our culture greatly because as a result of that, because horses were much more larger and stronger than dogs, they were able to carry heavier loads and bigger loads. So the travois became bigger, and as a result of that, the teepees or the nitois became larger as well.
You could probably travel further too.
Yeah, you can travel further too. So the Blackfoot word for horse is bonagamida. So that derives from two Blackfoot words, bonaga meaning elk and imida meaning dog. So we called them elk dog because they're as big as an elk, but they took over the work of the dog. So they became carrying the nitois across the prairies as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That could expand territories and hunting places and foraging areas, so probably expand their diets and relationships as well, right?
Yeah. So it really improved our way of life. We can also ride on the horses as well, so we can ride across the prairies. They carried our nitois across the prairies and helped us move bigger loads. And so what I've been taught in the Blackfoot culture, so the bigger family that you have means that you're going to have a bigger teepee or nitois.
Or more bunk beds in the teepee.
Yeah. So if you have a small family, then your nitois is going to be a little bit smaller. But if you have a big family, then that's going to increase the size of your nitois. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So with this, are there any like specific points within this teepee ring? Any like directional markers here that would be of significance?
Yeah. So in the Blackfoot culture, we normally face the back of the teepee to the west because that's where the strong west winds come from. And we always face the doorway to the east because that's where the sun rose. And it was really important to have our backs face to the west because we didn't want the wind blown in through the door because it could potentially damage or knock down the teepee itself. The teepees were they're structured in a way where they're wind resistant. Out in the prairies, you need to do that. It's really important. Otherwise, you have teepees falling down all the time.
We don't want teepees falling down.
Yeah, so we have a specific way of setting our teepees here in the Blackfoot Territory. We have to adapt to the wind and the strong winds that come around as well.
And it's a more rare teepee? Usually it's a 4-pole base teepee.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's
So
the
we
more
use 4
common one.
poles. Yeah, so we
Yeah.
use 4 poles, and that helps with the structure. That's our foundation poles. So those poles help keep up the teepee standing straight. You'll notice in other cultures and other nations that they use 3 poles, and so that's very good for when you're setting up in the trees because they tie the poles together and then they raise them up.
Yeah.
And then when you're raising them up, you can kind of maneuver your way around the branches and trees.
Yeah.
But if you set it up in prairies, they're more susceptible to being knocked down because they're only 3 poles. They don't have that same structural integrity as the Blackfoots do. The reason why we did that is because the reason why we use 4 poles is because to give it extra stability. So even the way we set up our teepee as well is very important too. So instead of you'll notice some other nations, they have a perfect crown at the top. It makes like they go in a swirl and make almost an oval shape.
Yeah.
But you'll notice that the Blackfoot teepee almost looks messy. We get made fun of because it looks messy, but there's a reason behind that.
But there's order in that
Yeah,
mess, which sometimes makes sense.
Yeah, well, it makes
Sometimes you can see it.
yeah. So if you look at it from the front and the back, you'll notice that the poles look like this. They're all Y-shaped. So we stack the poles on top of each other. So the reason why we stack the poles on top of each other is because they support each other. So when it gets windy, they're leaning against each other and giving each other that support. And what's the coolest part is the last teepee pole that gets put on is considered the backbone, and that's also connected to the canvas of the teepee. So what that backbone does is it goes in between all of those that's the last pole that gets put on, and it goes in between all of those poles right in the center of that V, and it locks all of those poles into place so that they're locked in.
So much math.
Yeah.
I know we put up some teepees together.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of trial and error.
Yeah, I was still
we got
learning
in the
at that time.
experts after. We were the pre-experts.
yeah, pre-experts.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I was still learning during that time, so now I think I can set one up, hopefully. Yeah, got to do my test.
Yeah, no, that was fun. It's interesting to think of like being able to obviously like create a structure that works with the land and works with the wind and like anchors it down. It's not, you're not trying to fight against it and try to mitigate it, but you're trying to creating this amazing structure that works along with the elements that is specific to these lands.
Yeah, and you like adapt to your elements, and that's with other nations as well. You can see that in other nations, like for instance, the Stonies and the Crees, they adapted to the trees, where like they have the trees to take the impact of the wind. So don't have to worry about setting up their teepee as strong as ours. And so I got like when I was in Cree territory, I got humbled. I was
sometimes.
Yeah, I was trying to set up a Blackfoot teepee, I was trying to set up a Blackfoot teepee in the middle of Cree territory, and I found out the hard way that that's very difficult. So the best way I can describe it is with my hands. So we used our 4 main poles and we crisscross them like this, and so when they're laying flat on the ground, we have to rise them up. And when you're doing that in the middle of a bunch of trees in the forest, it's really difficult because you got all the branches and the trees knocking against the poles. So we have to keep taking it down, putting it back up, taking it down, putting it back up, and readjusting it until we got it right. That took really difficult. And then I watched the Cree set up their teepee. And so what they did was they tied all 3 of their poles together. They rose them up, and like any trees and branches that are in their way, they just maneuvered the teepees around the obstacles and set them up with ease. And once they had them straight up in the air, they spread out their poles. Cool. And yeah, it was really cool watching that. And it was really fast. So it showed me like how we adapted to each of our environments and why we're so different from one another, which was really cool.
That's very cool. Awesome. Should we go check out something else over there?
Yeah, I can show you the site I was digging in.
Okay, so this is what you've been working on.
Yeah, this is my unit. This is our section. So my unit is specifically in this corner right here. Yeah. It's a 1 by 1 meter square unit.
Yeah. It's a nice unit.
Thank you. Yeah, if you look in there, you notice that there's a bunch of stones in there.
Yep.
As I was digging this unit up, there's a bunch of gravel in there, like a lot of natural gravel. Yeah. Which was not really important to us, but you'll notice that these larger rocks, these larger stones that we're finding, someone put them here. We just don't know why yet.
How do you know someone put them here and they're not just natural big stones here?
Well, if you look at the campsite, you'll notice that there's a lot of large stones here. And so whoever was camping here might have taken these rocks and put them in this specific area. And you can see, if you look at the other units, you'll see that they're pretty empty compared to this one, which has a lot of stones in it.
Yeah.
And that one right there too. So someone has been using these stones for something. I just we haven't found out why. I do have a theory. My theory is because in this unit over here, we found yellow ochre paint. And
what would that be used for?
Yellow ochre paint would be used for ceremonial usage. So we'd use that in our ceremonies. So what I was thinking is this might have been a workshop to make the paint itself. They might have been using these larger rocks to grind down the pigments and then transferred it over here to create the ochre paint itself. So they would mix it with their binding agent. So usually the binding agent was animal fat. So once you mix the pigments with animal fat, you create your paint. You can apply that to teepees. You can use it in ceremonies.
Is this where the shells were found as well?
Yeah, this is where the shells were found. So right in that square right there, that's why we started digging into this unit, is because we found shells in there. And then we also uncovered these rocks. There's the yellow ochre paint that was uncovered over there, and then we had charcoal that was found right in the center around there.
And charcoal.
Yeah, charcoal. So charcoal is really important because that gives us a better indication of what time frame this may have been. So we can send that back into the lab. They can carbon date that, and it gives us around 100 to 200 year estimate of when this camp was around.
Okay, very cool.
But this is just my theory that it could be untrue, yeah. But just kind of piecing together the pieces, considering this is like the historical ceremonial spot, and this is where the person would camp out, and then maybe this is where they would make their paint.
Yeah.
And then once they have all their supplies and materials ready, they would go out and have their ceremonies on the hill.
Would you bring in elders or bring some of these awesome things in your goodie bags or to the elders and see what their thoughts are on it? Yeah,
so they're the ones that come in here and they confirm everything that we find. So we tell them like, oh, this could be like, for example, the chopper. Yeah. It could be like, oh, this is the chopper that we found. This could be used for chopping food. And they come and confirm that. They tell us the story of what it was used for. And so they're bridging that connection between our artifacts and our culture, which is really helpful.
So what's the plan for, like, you're learning so much stuff from this site now. What are you going to do with that information? What are the next steps for that? Or what do the elders want to do?
So I think what the elders want from all of this is to take that data and that information and then kind of share that with the Siksika Nation and our culture and our people, and then so that way we can have a better understanding of our culture, and also at the same time to preserve the stone ring, so that way people can come here and learn about it and then learn that this was once ceremonial grounds for the Blackfoot people, so that way when they come here they can have more respect for the site and the area as well. Yeah.
That's good. I think that's, as we were saying before about archaeology, is often, taking a lot and not giving back. And I think that bringing this information and this knowledge back to the community and allowing the next generation to learn the significance of this, the science of this, and how people have been doing this for thousands of years. And that's really important. So awesome. Well, keep up the great work. Check out your art, and we'll put up a TP soon.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi.